Alright y'all, let's talk about difficulty. Helldivers thrives off chaos, but lately it seemed like Arrowhead has been scared to death of making the game harder.
Are you looking to add more difficulties in the future?
We did that in Arc 2, and it might have not gone super well. A lot of players want to challenge themselves on the highest difficulty, so if we add a difficulty and it's too hard, I don't think the community will be too happy.
They've either flubbed their attempts or been too scared to add more levels of challenge because of the backlash they've gotten from players. My name is Commissar Kai, and today I mean to mend the disconnect between us and Arrowhead by looking at the history of difficulty in Helldivers, how we can use our complaints and feedback to effectively make the game better, and how we can balance a need for power fantasy while still rewarding team play. Helldivers' problem with difficulty starts in the tutorial, which is clearly a joke. The introduction to the game barely teaches you what the buttons do, and does absolutely nothing to encourage the player to rely on teamwork and coordinating fire to bring down enemies.
Helldivers fight in squads. Meet your new squad mate.
Greetings, fellow Helldiver.
What a fine soldier. Your brother in arms. A battle-forged bond that could never be replaced. Until now.
Having your tutorial be a bare-bones instruction manual wrapped in a joke isn't inherently a problem, but when you balance your game around the idea of a team of Helldivers working together to overcome issues, and then neglect to teach your players how to do that, people will start feeling weak. This is why I do what I do. I cover this gap for the game by showing y'all how to work as a squad with fun team play strategies, and I show you which weapons and loadouts synergize well so you can feel powerful. I'm happy to do this, but I think a lot of the balance whining comes from the fact that the game communicates absolutely nothing to you.
Load yourself up, recruit. This is the real deal. It's just you, the gun in your hands, and 2,000 megatons of explosives in close orbit. That's it!
It doesn't tell you that you can easily handle a Hulk by baiting it to one side so your team can shoot it in the back. It just expects you to figure this out. The next issue pertaining to difficulty lies with Arrowhead's approach to balance. Early on in the game's history, Arrowhead relied heavily on spreadsheets of information to determine which weapons needed buffs and nerfs, which was understandably met with a lot of backlash, because that's a stupid way to balance a game if it's your main criteria. Weapons that felt fun and good to use were being nerfed to bring them in line with weapons that did not feel fun and good to use. This was a fundamental mistake, and I do think Arrowhead has learned lessons from the community backlash, but they've clearly been scarred by the experience as well. This is also a problem. When the developers are so scared of nerfing any of the players' tools that they hesitate to make anything strong, we all lose. They lose creative freedom to make our experience better, and we lose the possibility of getting new weapons, armors, and stratagems that are uniquely powerful. Think about the Coyote. This weapon is beloved by a lot of players because it fills many needs a Helldiver has, but it's so strong and versatile that it's picked by 30% of Helldivers almost regardless of faction. We gotta be honest, something picked that often is an issue, but part of the issue could be that other ARs just don't measure up to what the players need, meaning logically, ARs need buffs. But another part of the issue could be that the gun is too damn strong for what it's supposed to do. Arrowhead took a risk and made a really fun weapon, but because they are terrified of nerfing our weapons even a little bit, they resorted to indirectly addressing the Coyote, and in the process made a lot of other weapons feel weaker that were not getting used nearly as much. Plus, they lost the trust of a lot of players by including these stealth nerfs. Also, they managed to undermine the buffs they gave to all the other ARs in the process. This fear of backlash is affecting us all, developers and players alike, and some of it is very stupid. Like when Shams mentioned the game needing to transition from a hardcore co-op focused shooter to a more casual experience because of the influx of Call of Duty players.
So we did not make Helldivers for 6 million Call of Duty players. We absolutely didn't. But we do now have 6 million Call of Duty players who've bought our game.
Oh, wow.
And they are interested in different things compared to, say, the audience that comes from Escape from Tarkov.
Why did so many of y'all act like he called you a slur? We want Helldivers to keep seeing more and more success, so why is it a bad thing to acknowledge that more casual gamers found the game appealing, and that caused Arrowhead to need to change their vision a bit? The original vision of Helldivers was more akin to Tarkov or Arma, and the developers gave up a lot of that dream to give players what they asked for. This is a good thing. When it's at its best, Helldivers straddles a careful line between power fantasy and milsim. When we get too close to one side of the spectrum or the other, the game suffers as a result. I know a lot of people get mad about the whole spread democracy with overpowered weapons bit from the back of the box, and they'll use this as evidence that we're somehow being cheated.
What they were saying is that we didn't live up to the promise that we made to them. So maybe the text is a little bit small, but on the back side of the box for the game it says, spread democracy with overpowered weapons. And we had just balanced all of the weapons so they were under the line of what would be considered overpowered. So the community, they were saying like, you guys are ruining this game, you guys suck at developing games. And what they meant was, hey, I think with the recent changes, you've stepped a little bit too far away from the original promise of what the game is supposed to be.
But did y'all ever glance at what's right frickin' next to it? Work as a team to overcome impossible odds. Why are we so dead set on having one or the other when we can have both? The best moments this game has ever had came from Helldivers struggling against the impossible. We can't have impossible odds that require teamwork to overcome if every gun is as strong as the crossbow or the coyote. But we also can't enjoy overpowered weapons if we swing too far on the armor side of the spectrum. There needs to be balance.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
And we can only get there if we start being a little more willing to compromise. But don't take my word for it, let's take a quick look at two of the battles that made Helldiver history and see how they either struck that balance or fell on their face. The most famous example you are all familiar with is Mavelon Creek. This was the first real challenge for Helldivers, and for good reason. Back in those days, we saw higher spawn rates for enemies, but we also had opponents that were much deadlier. For example, rocket devastators never ran out of rockets, and a single shot to the dome was enough to have you knocking on Lady Liberty's door. Most enemies were more accurate than the clankers of today, and we also had to deal with critical headshots, meaning even the humblest communist could punch your ticket with a lucky shot. And by the time of the third battle for the creek, we had to contend with massive swarms of gunships and the newly implemented Factory Strider. We had enemies that were scary. We were put in situations where if we didn't keep up with the bots' assaults, we would run out of reinforcements and fail the mission. We accomplished all of this without the current version of thermite grenades or the recoilless rifle, warp packs, orbital napalm barrages, or any of the seriously punchy tools we have today. We did it by teaming up and watching each other's backs, since doing anything else resulted in getting liberated from your body. The creek gave us a balance of overwhelming odds and overpowered weapons, for the time anyway. This balance, combined with the player's will to not lose the creek at any cost, is what created the most memorable battle in Helldivers history. The certainty of death and the reliance on the Helldiver next to you is what should have taught us what democracy expects of Helldivers. Unless we're willing to throw ourselves on the pyre of freedom once again and accept difficulty, I don't think we'll ever have another battle like the creek. It was our first, but unless we inject that challenge back into the game, it could be our last. In contrast to the creek, we recently had to deal with Oshune, which was the first time the marriage of difficulty and ability fell apart at the seams in a major story battle. The first conquest of the Gloom was always supposed to be hard, and the new bugs delivered.
Do you mean Terminids or glitches?
Yes, the highs were high, but the lows were about thigh deep. Why a desert planet infested with fascism has giant random pools of thigh deep water never made any sense to me. But they also came with the massive downside of restricting your movement, which was especially bad since movement was the only way to avoid things like rupture bugs popping out of the ground or having your face melted off by a dragon roach. The dragon roach's fire-based attacks, combined with one of the jankiest hitboxes we've ever seen, meant you couldn't rely on skill to avoid them like stingrays. Instead, you had to bring fire-resistant armor, which was completely useless in the caves, meaning to survive one threat, you had to nerf yourself against others. This isn't even mentioning all the massive performance problems that were introduced with this update. Between crashes and frame rate issues, the Rupture Warriors gutting your loadouts and your stim supply, and Daryl spawning on a timer to ruin your day. The difficulty of the planet was replaced with raw frustration. It certainly didn't help when later in the operation, Arrowhead decided to drop mission modifiers on us balance that restricted our spare ammo. This entire experience was spoiled because the difficulty didn't call you to rise above a challenge. It asked you to endure a frustration. Hopefully by now y'all get my point on difficulty. The challenge is what makes great stories, but it has to marry difficulty with ability, otherwise it just ends up being frustrating. So now let's get on to how we can give better feedback and stop calling each other glazed divers and shouting skill issue. The people that play a game are the best source of finding problems within that game, but in general, we are terrible at giving workable solutions. This is because we don't know the full picture. We can't see all the data. Most of us have no background in game design, and most importantly, we are not paid to fix problems with our favorite games. It's our job to show Arrowhead where the problems lie, what we enjoy and what we don't.
I see us and the community as having a doctor-patient relationship. If I go to the doctor and I say, hey, doctor, I have a headache, it's brain cancer. The doctor would be very bad if he says, no, go home. And likewise, the doctor would be very bad if he immediately says, or she immediately says, okay, let's start you on chemo. Neither of these are the right answer. Instead, the doctor should say, I hear you, I understand that you're hurting, let's look into this, and then ask them more. Try to find the answer to what is the problem.
A good example of this is the term grunt fantasy, which was coined by my fellow propaganda commander Odo, and it's a good example of how to point out a symptom. His complaint is that a lot of weapons feel too weak, and this is valuable feedback to give Arrowhead. Weapons should feel rewarding to use. For example, pistols would not be overpowered if they didn't have this weirdly high sway factor. They would just feel better to use. Plenty of weapons in our armory suffer from minor quality of life problems that, if solved, would make them much more fun to use and make us feel more effective in our role as Helldivers. We don't want to be Stifles, stumbling over our own guns. We want to be Helldivers that will fight courageously to our last breath. But the term grunt fantasy has a significant downside with how it can be interpreted. It implies, intentionally or not, that we should forgo the themes and messages of the game and fully cave to the power fantasy. I don't want to be Doom Guy, and I don't think Odo does either. I'm only pointing out that this type of slogan has limits to its usefulness. We do not want to be grunts, but we should remain expendable. That's the very core of being a Helldiver. We share the experience of being used as tools of managed democracy. It's what gives the game its humor and what keeps death from stinging too harshly. After all, if you are expected to die multiple times per mission, then managing to defy those expectations and survive is all the sweeter. Right now, my biggest complaint is that the balance of player skill and difficulty are out of whack. We have gotten better at the game. Our weapons have gotten stronger, and our enemies are weaker and less numerous. This has created a situation where we're getting less chaotic fun and are more just running through the motions. For example, gunships used to be a terrifying threat. They could spawn endlessly from fabricators. They never ran out of rockets, they had tankier armor and more hit points, plus they were more accurate. The endless rocket spam was just frustrating rather than difficult, but the other mechanics are what made them a challenge to overcome. Now they're just a nuisance to be handled at your leisure. We can voice our complaints and give suggestions for what we think would improve the game. We should do this, and we should do it often, but we're all a bunch of crayon-eating, goldfish-enjoying Helldivers. Implementing solutions and taking our feedback should be left in the hands of the developers. So to talk to y'all a bit more about what solutions look like from behind the screen, I brought a genuine game dev to explain it.
Thank you, Kai. Hello, Helldivers. You might recognize me from the game show episodes where I showed just how bad the Commissar was at trivia. What you might not know is that my day job is actually teaching the fundamentals of game design. Given that in my day-to-day I work with literal children, the Commissar thought that I had an adequate amount of crayons to help talk to you Helldivers. The most important part of any games discussion is going to be a game's flow. That state where you as a player lose all track of the world around you and you become fully wrapped up in the fun of the game. Game flow is often shown as a pretty simple graph with the game's difficulty on one side and the player's skill on the others. Our goal as game designers is to keep you in that Goldilocks zone where your skill and the game's difficulty perfectly match. If a game is too hard, it'll be stressful and anxiety inducing. If a game is too easy, it's going to be boring and you won't have any fun. Helldivers as a game hasn't been in a proper state of flow for a while, and that's for two main reasons. Number one, players have become too good at the game. You know how to handle 3 Biotitans spawning at once. You can pinpoint a Spore Charger in the middle of its Spore Cloud without even seeing the Charger itself, and you know how to properly dispatch a bot drop with just a couple of stratagems. Number two, Arrowhead has made the game easier by balancing the game to make the player stronger and the enemies weaker. While there might be individual nerfs to players or individual buffs to enemies, the general trend in balance has been wildly in favor of the player. These two things combined have resulted in a shift upward and to the left. Nowhere is this more evident than the current state of level 10 difficulty.
Yeah, level 10 should require a degree of teamwork, but right now, any form of coordination makes this game into a cakewalk. I can take any random group of total noobs and have them full clear in a super helldive mission with minimal effort on my part. Going through a level 9 when the game launched was much harder than soloing a level 10 is today. This is why I do ridiculous challenges. Part of it is to entertain y'all, but another part is it's the only way I can find that state of flow I enjoyed when I was learning the game. Sorry about that, Tyler. The floor is yours once again.
Ow, please don't do that again. As I was saying, the player base has been pushed towards the harder difficulties being the default, not the exception. A large part of that is simply because the harder difficulties provide better rewards. This makes perfect sense, but it also has the negative effect of making it so that doing anything below the hardest difficulties is considered a waste of time. We have busy lives, so we naturally want to optimize our time. This is also partly why you can always rely on your players to optimize the fun out of a game. Once players have found the most effective tactic available, that will become the meta. And once a meta has been established, players will stop doing the experimentation that helped make the game more challenging. Let me ask you a question. Is the coyote the strongest gun in the game because it's the coyote? Or is it the coyote because it's the strongest gun?
Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one.
Whether we like it or not, nerfs and buffs are both an important part of a game's life cycle that help preserve the game flow by ensuring the challenge of a game stays relevant. Neither nerfs nor buffs should be met with fears of the sky falling, but an opportunity to experiment once again and re-enter that state of flow that made us love the game in the first place.
Thanks, Tyler. Good feedback starts simple. This gun sucks, or these enemies are too strong, are simple opinions. But they can still be useful when it comes to identifying what can make the game better. But I want to challenge y'all to take it just one step further. Does the Defender suck because of the drag factor limiting its range? Or are the rate of fire and reload speed just far too slow to make it an effective close combat weapon? There are so many factors that go into making weapons feel good to use and enemies fun to fight, and all of this affects how well the game flows when we play. Now that we all understand game flow a little better, let's talk about suggestions, keeping in mind everything we've talked about. I am not a game designer, but as an avid Helldiver, I can point to some things that make the game too easy or harm team play, but my solutions are a shot in the dark based on personal experience. I have no idea if these would be easy to implement, or what other unintended effects they might have. I just think they would be fun. We gotta start with a tutorial. There is no reason this should not teach you a bit of teamwork. Even something as simple as baiting a charger so someone behind it can pop its butt would go a long way in teaching Helldivers that they don't have to overcome everything alone. The tutorial is only good currently for teaching you what the buttons do and introducing you to the flavor of the game. They blow smoke up your ass to make you seem better than you are, so you have some form of confidence to drop into certain death.
In all my years, I've never witnessed such acrobatic perfection. Those unthinking bugs never stood a chance against a genius tactical mind like yourself. I've never seen such flawless terminal activation.
I get that this is a joke, which is important for setting up the universe, but if we want this to be a co-op game with any semblance of team play, you have to teach people, and I cannot do it alone. Building on making a better tutorial, I see no reason why we can't have a bestiary. Surely, Super Earth has the data on enemy weak points and how damage works. Sharing this with Helldivers would mean I have a lot less content to make, but it would better equip players to handle harder challenges. If you know that a laser cannon can remove a dog's miniguns really fast, it makes that enemy substantially easier to overcome just by having that knowledge. Plus, it would help inform people about how to build loadouts if they could see a database of weak points and vulnerabilities. Before we head to the battlefield, we should also be able to see which seed we're dropping on. Arrowhead, y'all already do this with sub-factions. If I drop on a Predator Strain mission, I can prepare for it. Why not let us do this with every single mission type? Facing down bile spewers with a grenade launcher is really fun, but if I expected a hunter seed and brought a stalwart and got a bile spewer seed instead, I'm just going to be miserable. Giving us this information should help with game flow, and I cannot personally see a downside. If there is one, you really need to share it with the community. More communication is always appreciated. With regards to our difficulty levels, make a level 11 difficulty. Make it crushingly hard and remove samples from it. I don't care about compensation for a mission when I've had everything unlocked for over a year. I just want to do my part to liberate the galaxy. Give us a bit of extra liberation score for completing this new difficulty and your veterans will flock to it, because we have nothing more to gain but a lot to give. For actual on-mission suggestions, I have a huge beef with gunship fabricators. These used to be like stalker lairs. When you saw one, everyone on the team would rush to take it out, because if you didn't and you couldn't keep up with the spawns, you would get overwhelmed and have no hope of finishing the mission. They don't need to be that punishing, but limited the spawns to 4 gunships is ridiculous. We need objectives that require, or at least benefit massively from having multiple Helldivers tackle them at once. This should encourage team play without being too heavy-handed about it. Give the bots a bit more of a garrison and up the spawn cap, and I think this objective would be a lot more fun to tackle. Next, I think we need enemies that can apply status effects to us. Think smokers from Left 4 Dead. Putting disabler enemies in the game would encourage people to stay grouped up so they could protect each other. But we don't have to just copy Left 4 Dead or Darktide. We could have something like a Tesla tower that traps you instead of killing you. Once destroyed, it could release Helldivers from their predicament. I don't know exactly how this should be implemented, but I do think that having threats other than death that require teamwork to overcome would massively benefit the game. Speaking of status effects, I'd love it if different enemies were more or less vulnerable to specific effects. For example, if dangerous enemies like Hulks or War Striders were more vulnerable to stuns compared to other enemies, we could see some pretty cool loadouts based on cooperation. This would instantly make weapons like the pacifier or stun grenade much better without having them take over the game. They'd be real strong against the appropriate targets, and the same as they are now against everything else. The final one I wanted to mention for this video was Gundam Boy's suggestion for base loadouts. These are stale as hell. We've been clearing the same bases for so long, I can tell exactly where every spawner is as soon as I see the base. That and every faction has defenses that are not being used to defend their bases. Bot bases could be protected by AA guns or threatened incoming Helldivers with mortars. Bugs could have Shrieker nests or Stalker lairs as part of a base. Just give us something to make this experience feel fresh, because killing a base right now is just an ordnance check rather than a challenge. This has been my Liberty Day wish list of changes to the game to make it more challenging and to encourage teamwork. To Arrowhead, I love that this game has a co-op shooter at its core, but constantly making us stronger and our enemies weaker to fulfill the power fantasy has not been making the game more fun. It's just been making it more accessible to new players. Let us use the wonderful community we've all created to guide new players through difficult things. Give us a little trust that we can handle it, and in turn, maybe we can trust you with some nerfs. Y'all ask us to set aside our lives in the name of managed democracy. I ask you to set aside your fear of your players and give us the challenge we crave. We are all in this together. If y'all can keep listening to the community, we can give you more grace when it comes to adjusting our favorite game. And to my fellow Helldivers, I ask y'all to rise above petty grievances. A bad change to the game is not a personal insult to you. It's just a screw up. We can help guide Arrowhead in the right direction by complaining with dignity. If there is anything you don't find fun about the game or you think could be done better, voice it. But remember, you're talking to people. Not bugs or bots, but human beings that love this game every bit as much as you do. There is nothing useful in calling for people to be fired because you don't like a change to a game. This behavior is foregoing your logic and reason and giving into the same animal instincts that make our enemies so abhorrent. Insults and threats won't make the game better. They just make you feel less powerless in the moment. Keep your passion and use your voice, but extend at least the smallest amount of kindness that you can muster. Don't make the developers dread going to work. Infuse them with the same passion that you both share. If you ever lose hope and need someone to pick you back up, I'll be there, sword in hand and ready to take on the future. I hope you'll follow me. Until next time, this is Commissar Kai, signing out. Damon, look at me. Yep. You brought the crossbow. No, I'm not going to do it.
Just for you. Understood.